Five on Friday. Take 792. Let's get this thing done. I'm DJ Alex, and this is your Hunky Vape 5 on Friday Vaping News, Science, and Advocacy Report for the 13th of November, 2020. On the news today, drugs win on Election Day. Well, except for nicotine. Nebraska expanded Clean Indoor Air Act is now going to prohibit e-cigarettes in indoor workplaces. In Anchorage, Alaska, the Assembly moves to include vaping e-cigarette products in their tobacco taxes at a rate of, you ready for this? 55%. In Australia, Ampol, a major convenience store retailer, says they're willing to train their staff to promote e-cigarette benefits. And New Zealand hits the rewind button. Vaping is now effectively banned where smoking is. This week's editorial comes from Massachusetts General Hospital. New research strengthens the case for e-cigarettes as a smoking cessation aid. There's a big surprise. They're finally getting around to admitting what facts are out there. Science segment. Nicotine therapy being touted as a cure for Parkinson's and COVID-19 as the effects of smoking are being studied. This week's highlighted advocacy group is the Canadian Vaping Association. And today we have a special message for vapors from Microsoft. Are you ready for this? Our top story of the day. Drugs except nicotine win on Election Day. This is published in Inside Sources. Americans sent a clear message on Election Day that it's time to end the war on drugs. Every ballot measure to decriminalize or legalize drugs received overwhelming approval from voters. There was, however, one notable exception. You guessed it, nicotine. Voters in 5 states approved marijuana legalization measures. Arizona, New Jersey, Montana approved recreational marijuana. South Dakota legalized both medicinal and recreational, and Mississippi legalized medicinal cannabis. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C. approved a measure to decriminalize a number of psychedelic drugs, including magic mushrooms. Oregon voters also approved the use of psilocybin mushrooms and decriminalized possession of small amounts of illegal drugs. If you get caught with illegal drugs in Oregon, you know what the top fine is going to be? $100. And you will be treated as a health problem to the state. However, they need to pay for that. So, Oregonians also passed a new 65% tax on nicotine vaping and heated tobacco products. Yep. Additionally, state legislatures around the country have also instituted bans on certain flavors or types of nicotine vaping products. Yep, although most Americans do not use cannabis, the majority now recognize that criminalizing it is costlier than the harm that it does to society. Legalizing cannabis and increasingly other drugs is now viewed as a means of preserving personal choice and pursuing social justice. These priorities should be a part of the debate surrounding nicotine vapor products, but thanks to well-funded misinformation campaigns, guess what? They're not. Anti-tobacco outfits have misled the public into believing that nicotine vapor products are just another big tobacco product, that they are no less harmful than smoking, and they prey on minority communities and threaten public health. With ample funding, including from Michael Bloomberg and Bill Gates, they've flooded news media and scare stories about youth vaping and vaping-related illness, and convinced the majority of the public that nicotine in any form is harmful. Well, except for the patches, the gums, the lozenges, and the sprays that the pharmaceutical companies have in every grocery store on the bottom shelf for anybody that wants to have access to it. Wonder why they do that. I guess we'll find out when we get to the science segment, huh? All these are wrong, but it hasn't stopped the news from being spread like wildfire. The academics Activists and health professionals that comprise the tobacco control industry have recently faced a conundrum. After decades of warning about the dangers of smoking, reductions in the behavior have slowed. And then came e-cigarettes, which promised smokers a way to enjoy nicotine without the risk of combustible tobacco. Based on all available evidence, they delivered on that promise. And the smoking rate for adults and youth is lower than it has ever been in recorded history. Some tobacco control activists recognize this as an achievement, but others see it as a threat to their funding and influence. And thus, they've turned against not only smoking, but against the use of non-pharmaceutical nicotine and labeled it as an addiction. Groups like the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, and the American Cancer Society have been lobbying for policies that actually push people towards cigarettes. The product that truly puts people at risk for lung and heart problems as well as cancer. By making vapes less available without recognizing the contradiction. Yeah, it drives me insane, but if you'd like to read the rest of this article, very informative, perfect for Friday the 13th, there'll be a link in the description below. On to our next story. Expanded Clean Indoor Air Act prohibits the use of e-cigarettes in indoor workplaces. This comes from Lincoln, Nebraska. According to the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, the act includes office buildings, manufacturing facilities, retail stores, restaurants, bars, and all the other indoor places short of your own home. Fortunately, they did make an exception to include electronic smoking device retail outlets, otherwise known as vape shops, from the indoor e-cigarette restriction. Never a dull moment, is there? Anchorage Assembly moves to include vaping and e-cigarette products in their tobacco taxes. Yeah, that's exactly what they want to do. Rather than, implementing bans that they're going to look back on later, they decided that they're just simply going to tax the shit out of it. Traditional cigarette smoking has been declining for decades, in part because of the public information campaigns, smoke-free laws, and increasing tobacco taxes. American Lung Association in Canada. Now e-cigarettes are addicting a new generation of youth, threatening all of that progress. Okay. Imposing this tax on something that is actually helping people get away from combustible cigarettes and actually costing the state and local resources less money seems a little problematic. Don't you think? Vaping is generally less harmful than smoking a cigarette, but both are unhealthy according to the CDC. Yeah, we know who gives them money, don't we? Jumping down to Australia. Ampol willing to train staff to promote e-cigarette benefits. Ampol, a major Australian convenience store retailer, says that it wants to train employees to suggest electronic cigarettes as an alternative to combustible ones in a bid to help reduce the smoking rate. Ampol, the parent, Caltex, and foodery outlets across the country urged the government to allow nicotine-based vaping products to be sold in the same way as cigarettes in its submission to the Senate inquiry, according to the article in the Sydney Morning Herald. Ampol's head of government affairs, Todd Lloydell, wrote that the company was well positioned to help cigarette smokers transition to less harmful products and was willing to try selling electronic cigarette products through its large network of convenience stores. For example, our retail staff could provide a verbal cue to customers who ask to purchase cigarettes and encourage them to consider the alternative options available for them in the store. Australia's Senate Select Committee on Tobacco Harm Reduction will hold its first public hearing into nicotine vaping products, which is currently legally purchased only with a doctor's prescription. Committee Chair Holly Hughes said that more than 8,000 submissions had been overwhelmingly supportive of vaping and overwhelmingly not in favor of the script model. I would like to see recommendations around very serious regulations, she said. I don't think anyone is going to be a non-smoker and take it up. Yeah, why would you want to? The National Retailers Association represents 28,000 retailers across the country and also advocated for the consumer model of vaping regulation in Australia. Well, let's jump across the pond from Australia to New Zealand, where everybody thinks vaping is looked at so favorably. New Zealand. Common sense legislation for vapors? Yeah. Great. Not so much. They hit the rewind button. Yup. Vaping is now effectively banned where smoking is, and advocates are troubled as the new law takes effect. The general rule is if you wouldn't smoke there, you shouldn't vape there. Okay. I can understand, to be polite, you shouldn't vape in certain situations and in certain circumstances. But it doesn't end there. Some other key changes, thanks to the Labor Party. The sale or supply of vaping products to under 18 is prohibited. Okay, it's an adult-only product. That sounds measured and reasonable, like we're used to hearing from New Zealand. However, indoor vaping is prohibited at workplaces, restaurants, and licensed premises. What? What? So if you work at a premise, you can't vape in there anymore? Even if you own it, it's your own small business, you have no customers there, it's against the law for you to vape inside your own business? What? Vaping at schools is prohibited, and at early childhood centers, including outdoors. Yeah, kind of like in the United States at a hospital. You're not allowed to vape in a hospital. You have to walk a block and a half down the road where the hospital or the healthcare corporation now no longer owns the property if you want to, have a little drag of nicotine. Most advertising and sponsorship of vaping products is prohibited. And here's the best kicker of it all. Flavors will be restricted. What benefit does banning partial or limiting flavors help anybody? How is that going to help anybody? All it's going to do is hurt people and limit their choices so that they can't go and stay off of deadly combustible cigarettes. It gets better. Retailers cannot encourage the use of vaping products, with some exceptions. Okay? Restrictions on vaping flavors and a ban on advertising will kill off the best tool for quitting smoking and will condemn more people to cigarettes for longer. Labor has cracked down on the alternative that is 95% safer than tobacco, just as if it was tobacco. Because that's exactly what an ex-smoker wants to do. Go hang out with a bunch of smokers. That makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't you take and make common sense legislation for this as well? This isn't a free ride ticket that the vapors were asking for. We want common sense legislation. And you relegating vapors to go hang out with smokers when you want to go out and have a little bit of a nicotine fix so that you don't go back to smoking, you're relegating them to go out and hang out with the people. It's kind of like taking an ex-alcoholic and telling them, you know what, if you want to have a Coke or you want some Kool-Aid or, you know, some other fizzy drink, you have to go to the bar to consume your beverage. That's exactly what this is like. It's a load of horse shit because New Zealand has hit the rewind button. The only people that benefit from restricting vaping flavors is the tobacco industry. Let there be no mistake about that. However, on this Friday the 13th, our editorial comes from Massachusetts General Hospital. Yep, that's right. The editorial is titled New Research Strengthens the Case for E-Cigarettes as Smoking Cessation Aids. But more evidence is needed. Yeah, the but comes from Nancy Rigotti, MD, head of Tobacco Research and Treatment Center at Massachusetts General Hospital. In the debate about e-cigarettes, we need to remember that there are millions of smokers who need help and could benefit from electronic cigarettes. Nearly 500,000 Americans die each year from tobacco-related diseases, such as lung cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and emphysema, which makes smoking the leading preventable cause of death in the United States. Most smokers want to stop, and more than half try to quit every single year, but only 5 to 7% are able to sustain the quit long term. Using treatments approved by the FDA increases the likelihood of success, but many smokers who use these therapies still struggle to remain tobacco-free. Says Rigotti, who's also a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. Rigotti sees the promising role for e-cigarettes as an option. However, if you read the rest of the article, you'll come to find out that she wants you to try all the pharmaceutical products first. Why? Here is a summary of a study being done by Read Wellbeing. E-cigarettes for smoking cessation. And this is a pilot comparison to nicotine replacement therapy and champix. And they're comparing it directly to electronic cigarettes. And I'll spare you the details, but it boils down to this. People were given a choice. You can quit smoking with electronic cigarettes. You can get smoking with electronic cigarettes and nicotine replacement therapy. Or you can quit smoking with nicotine replacement therapy. Or you could quit with champix, otherwise known as Chantix here in the States. And here's the results. Those people that tried to quit smoking with electronic cigarettes had a 93% success rate for the 4-week period that this was being done. Those that use an electronic cigarette and nicotine replacement therapy, such as a patch, only had a 72% success rate. And those that only use nicotine replacement therapy only had a 50-50 chance of quitting smoking for 4 weeks. Champix, the pharmaceutical option, had a success rate of 57%. Wonder how many of those people had psychedelic effects or psychological problems because of them using champix. One of the little side effects of it. There are no side effects to electronic cigarettes, except for the fact that it's 95% safer than smoking deadly combustible cigarettes. Oh, yeah. So, just to remind everybody, nicotine therapy is being touted as a cure for Parkinson's and COVID-19 as researchers study the effects of smoking. That's pretty significant news, don't you think? Yeah. Why isn't this covered by ABC, NBC, CBN, BBC? How come you don't see this on any of their websites? Huh? I called them. I tried to reach out to them. And you know what their answer to me was? What? That's their answer. Well, here's an article published in news18.com. When we hear the word nicotine, most of us immediately relate it to cigarettes and the damaging effect smoking can have on the heart. Nicotine is present abundantly in the tobacco plant, which is used to make cigarettes. However, the addictive chemical also occurs naturally in tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. According to a research study, people who consume these vegetables in their diet have a 30% lower chance of developing Parkinson's disease. In this disease, the person loses control of body movements. It happens when the cells that produce a neurotransmitter known as dopamine start dying off. The chemical nicotine is shown to activate those cells, which release dopamine. And there's another way where nicotine helps patients of Parkinson's disease who also suffer from bone loss. Research suggests that nicotine binds to the receptors, which increase the amount of calcium entering the cells in the bones. Research led by Newcastle University's Dr. Mohammed Shoaib aims to find a nicotine-based treatment for Parkinson's disease. And Dr. Shoaib is the head of the Psychopharmacology Research Group at the university. As per him, several nicotine compounds were developed for the treatment of brain-related disorders like Alzheimer's and schizophrenia, but they had to be discarded because of their side effects. Why wouldn't you just use the nicotine that you already know has these beneficial effects? Oh, that's right. We can't possibly use nicotine because nicotine is a naturally occurring substance, and you can't charge people for a naturally occurring substance. You have to chemically modify it so you can patent it, so that you can sell it and make money that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, because once people figure out that that's all it took was nicotine, they just go eat more tomatoes if they weren't smoking, or they would go eat more peppers or more eggplants. Put your tinfoil hat on, because shit's about to get real. In April 2020, French scientists also started a trial to test their hypothesis that the chemical used in cigarettes can help the body fight COVID-19. Wondering why they did that? Well, there was a French study based on the public health data that was available and published that showed that smokers had an 80% less chance of getting COVID-19 compared to non-smokers. Kind of the opposite of the stuff we've been hearing in the news. Well, there's going to be a link in the description below to the Human Brain Project in the European Union. Jean-Pierre Changot is the Emeritus Professor of Neuroscience at the Institut Pasteur and conducts research in molecular neuroscience within the HBP. If you want to find out more about his study of using nicotine to treat or prevent, more likely, COVID-19, check out the link in the description. That leaves us to our advocacy group for the week. And our advocacy group for the week is no one other than the Canadian Vaping Association. The Canadian Vaping Association's long-term vision is for a smoke-free Canada, achieved through consumer awareness of the relative risk of vaping and balanced regulation. The Canadian Vaping Association remains committed to working with Health Canada and regional health authorities to implement regulations which balance access for adult smokers with youth protection. There's a wonderful video on here, and it's only like 3 minutes long. Take a look at it, thecva.org. You can watch the video for yourself. I've seen lots and lots of articles out there because the Canadian Vaping Association is constantly putting out press releases encouraging people to take an honest look at vaping as tobacco harm reduction, vaping as a way to quit smoking. Yeah. Well, that concludes our report for today, with the exception of the special message we have directly from Microsoft. Microsoft is asking people to asking vapors, please don't blow vape smoke into your Xbox Series X. Yeah. "2020 has thrown us a curveball yet again, with Microsoft forced to inform people not to blow vape smoke, which is not smoke, vapor, into their Xbox X Series. And this is because a series of viral videos depicted smoke coming out of the Xbox X Series. And it's forced Microsoft to respond to concerns surrounding the console's health and safety. Multiple videos featured smoke billowing out of the top of Microsoft's latest console. And this was published on Twitter. Xbox posted, "We can't believe we have to say this, but please do not blow vape smoke into your Xbox X Series. For any non-vape related support questions, please check out the links below." Why did they do this? Well, it's because somebody posted a picture of this.
Chavales, a ver, esta gente se entretenga en estas cosas en el día de lanzamiento de la Xbox Series X.
Yeah. You can see him blowing the vape into the bottom of the Xbox, and the air movement through it makes it look like it's catching on fire, when it's obviously not. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the 5 on Friday Vaping News and Advocacy Report here on Hunky Vape. If you found this information useful, please hit the subscribe button below. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week.